Once upon a time, in a small village called Umonede, there lived a beautiful lady called Azuka. She was married to Chigozie, the son of Mazi Atuanya, the hunter. She loved her husband very much, but her mother-in-law never liked her. She hated her so much that whatever she does, her mother-in-law always complained and condemned her. Azuka and her husband were very much in love. They weren't so rich, but they were very comfortable because they had each other. Ugonta, Azuka's husband, was but a hunter. She will always pray that God protects him anytime he's in the thick forest. One morning, Azuka was preparing a very sweet soup specially for her husband. Since it was raining and he wasn't able to go into the bush. After the rain, Azuka went to the kitchen to prepare a delicious soup for her husband. Her mother-in-law was just coming back from the market. She was filled with rage seeing Azuka. She ignored her greetings and bashed inside the house. Azuka sniffed a pot of soup and inhaled the aroma that was oozing out from the pot. She put a little of it in her palm and tasted it with the tip of her tongue. Oh, Nnam, you will eat a very wonderful and delicious meal today. I'm making this specially for you, she said with a smile on her face. A mother-in-law stomped out of the house angrily with a bucket of water and poured it on Azuka and the rest on the pot. Azuka stood there shocked, looking so wet and surprised, with tears flowing down her eyes. Ugonta rushed out of the house, hearing her screaming loudly from the outside. Her mother hissed loudly and went inside the house. One morning, she came back from the market. It was raining, but her mother-in-law pushed her outside the house to the rain. She told her not to come anywhere near the house. Azuka slept outside the rain because her husband went to sell some bush meats at the neighboring village. When he returned and met Azuka sleeping helplessly outside the house, he took her in. That night she became sick. Ugonta didn't know what to do, but he took her to a healer. When the woman touches her stomach, she realized she was pregnant. The old woman was a healer and also a midwife. Ugonta joy knew no bound. When the midwife told Ugonta the news of her wife's pregnancy, he thought that the news would change her mother's attitude towards her. But Ugonna's mother's anger and hatred became worse the moment the news of her pregnancy was broken to her. One morning, she sent Azuka to the farm and warned her never to return until it was dark. She pleaded that she was pregnant and her pregnancy was already heavy. Azuka went to the farm with her heavy pregnancy. While she bent down to work, as she was weeding the grasses, she fainted in the farm. Some people that were also working in the farm saw her and helped carry her unconscious body to the house. They called the healer, and she came and took care of her. She woke up the next morning to see her husband sitting right next to her as he was watching over her all through the night. He already made a soup with akpu, so she will have something when she wakes up. When she opened her eyes and saw her husband to be the first person by her side, she had a sweet smile all over her face. She ate the food with happiness, while her husband fed her as she was rubbing her stomach. One morning, Ugonta was set to go into the bush to check on his traps. He called her pregnant wife, played with her, and told her he will always come back for her and his unborn child. Azuka smiled happily, staring at her face. Her husband held his breath as he embraced Azuka and held her tightly. He said goodbye to her as he left the house. Ugonta went into the bush to check on his traps. The moment he stepped his foot into the bush, he was bitten by a snake. He fell to the ground as he groaned painfully. He tried to help himself up, but he was too weak. The snake venom had already spread all through his body as his lips started changing. He cried out for help with his last strength. Two passerbys that were also hunters saw him and rushed to him. They carried him to his house. The last thing that came out of his mouth was, "Oh my goodness. God, please help me for the sake of my pregnant wife. I want to see my unborn child." When Azuka came out of the house holding her stomach, as she saw her husband lying lifeless, she screamed loudly and tearfully. She pleaded for Ugonta not to leave them. He tried to explain that he was bitten by a snake. He looked at his wife emotionally and painfully. Azuka was already traumatized. It wasn't too long when Ugonta gave up the ghost, as the snake venom overpowered his body. His aged mother cried bitterly. Azuka couldn't bear the thought of losing her husband. She fainted and she was rushed inside the house. People from the neighboring village came to mourn with them as they showed their sympathy. Mama Nuku cried bitterly as he felt the pain of her son and couldn't bear the thought of losing her only son. Azuka was unconscious for a few days. 2 months after, Azuka was due for delivery. She was outside sweeping under the heavy rain as instructed by her mother-in-law. As her mother-in-law stood there watching her, because she asked her to sweep the whole compound inside the rain. Azuka didn't do anything to object. While she was sweeping, she screamed and fell slowly to the ground, groaning in pains while holding her waist. My baby, I think it's my baby. It's coming," she cried out while her mother-in-law stood there watching her. She went to call some of the few people to help her carry Azuka to the midwife. The old midwife received her happily. Azuka was still groaning in pain agonizingly and cried out painfully, pleading the midwife to save her life and that of her unborn child. The midwife helped her deliver safely a beautiful baby girl, but her mother-in-law didn't even touch the baby. Azuka was already unconscious the moment she put to bed. Mama Nuko asked the midwife to give the baby far away in the neighboring village, or rather poison or strangle her, or do whatever she wishes with her. When she regained consciousness, she should inform her that a child died the moment she gave birth to her. But the old woman carried the newborn baby in her hand. She was so happy, and she looked at her emotionally. She felt pity on the new baby as she was sleeping in her hand, so tiny and beautiful. She dropped tears as she thought of having the innocent baby. She couldn't harm the innocent baby. "I can't do this to this innocent child and her mother. She deserved to be happy. Oh no, I'm not a murderer," she said to herself. She was also a healer. She used some herbs for a quick recovery. When she recovered after 2 days, she asked about her baby, but the midwife lied that her baby had died the same way she was born. She cried bitterly and uncontrollably as she was told that her baby died on the same day she was born. The midwife had the reason of staying and lying to her. She wanted to go back to her mother-in-law, but the midwife advised her not to. She told her that trouble might be waiting for her there and she might not survive it alive. She took her advice and she reluctantly stepped outside her house and cried bitterly, remembering her husband. 2 days later, she was strong and called the midwife and told her she was leaving to her maternal grandmother's home. She walked a long distance home. When she got to the small hut, it was so dirty as no one has been there or lived there for many years. After the death of her mother and after she got married, she began to sweep and tidy up the compound. She settled there all alone. Azuka was so lonely. She had no husband nor a child. Her daughter had grown into a beautiful woman. She always asked of her parents because she regarded the midwife as a grandmother. That was what the midwife made her to believe, so she would stop worrying. One morning, she was sitting outside the heavy rain downpour. It was stormy. As the midwife was watching her from the window, she had pity on her and called her and told her everything that happened. How her grandmother hated her mother so much that she asked her to be strangled to death or give her away to a faraway village and also poison her mother. She cried bitterly and uncontrollably. That morning, the midwife took her to her mother's maternal home. She saw her mother. She was sweeping outside the hut, but she didn't have the courage to go to her. She went back with the midwife. She couldn't bear the thought of her mother still being alive. She didn't even believe it. She cried all that night to bed. She set out again the next morning with the midwife. She was already old as she was with a walking stick. Her mother was cooking when she saw the midwife and a beautiful young lady. Her mother's intuition told her she somehow related to the young lady. She ran to her and embraced her with her eyes full of tears. Azuka held her tightly as if she'd seen her before or knew her from way back. The midwife told her everything that happened and why she had to lie to her. She apologized to her and Azuka couldn't believe her ears and her eyes seeing that her daughter is actually alive. She thanked God tearfully for making a day like this to come. Azuka and her daughter insisted that she wants to go and see her grandmother to let her know that she was truly alive. They journeyed the next day to her father's compound. Her grandmother was surprised to see them, as she was also surprised to see her grandmother already old and was sitting outside peeling cassava. She was surprised to see Azuka still alive and the daughter. She asked whom she was, and she told her she's her granddaughter, whom she ordered to be killed. She was so shocked. She then regretted all of her actions and began to beg for forgiveness. She asked both the mother and the daughter for forgiveness. The moment Azuka said she had forgiven her, a great thunder struck and she fell to the ground and died. The midwife stood behind them and said, "For the wages of sin is death." Azuka and her daughter lived happily, and Azuka still regarded the midwife as her mother and the daughter as her grandmother. Azuka's joy was immeasurable to behold a beautiful daughter alive. They lived happily ever after, and their joy was immeasurable. What do you learn from this story? Please drop your comments in the comment section. And don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. Thank you very much as you await another story.